Hello, my name is Cyclones Oz, and this morning we've woken to a ton of good news regarding ex-tropical cyclone Kirrily. She busted out big time as she moved over Townsville. It was a terrible forecast from my behalf and also from the forecast models and also the Bureau of Meteorology. This tropical cyclone did get to Category 3 severe tropical cyclone status over water, but it probably made landfall as a Category 1 strength tropical cyclone, and it was weakening dramatically as she made landfall as well. And it just goes to show you can have all the degrees in the world, you can have all the forecast model data in the world, you can have millions of dollars of satellite equipment as well, and you still can't predict these tropical cyclones better than the old timers that have been up here for 50 years and know exactly what's going on with these storms. A difficult forecast, but it was executed terribly. However, we're going to take a look at what Tropical Cyclone Kirrily is doing now. We're also going to take a look at another system in the Australian region that's at Category 4 status right now. I doubt a lot of people have heard of it because it's way out to sea and not expected to affect land. And we're also going to take a look at some thunderstorms expected across Queensland over the next 10 days. So for your latest weather update, this is Cyclones Oz. If you are brand new here, please do consider subscribing. We're about 200 subscribers away from 10,000. So if you could be one of those last 200, that would be much appreciated. Thank you so much for the support so far on the channel and also all the feedback on these videos. It's been great to see, and I will be presenting the weather for quite a long time to come, hopefully. So taking a look at the radar imagery right now, you can see it's moving towards Hughenden. The center of circulation is probably about 50 kilometers north of said Hughenden. It's dumping quite a lot of rainfall actually over the top, but it should start to ease off today. The majority of the rainfall is on the western side of the system. We'll get a really up-to-date picture on this. The rain is actually moving towards Julia Creek and Richmond right now, which is deep into Queensland. Again, a big fizzer in terms of maximum rainfall totals. I think Townsville picked up like 27 millimeters or something, and coupled with like 85 kilometer an hour wind gusts, it was basically just a bunch of gusty thunderstorms. I know Lucinda, which is a little bit further up the coast, recorded a peak wind gust of about 115 kilometers an hour. And there was also peak wind gusts of about 125 kilometers an hour on some of the reefs, which were way away from the storm center. So the Category 3 call was justified from the Bureau of Meteorology, but it was not a Category 3 as it made landfall. And it would have been a stretch to call this a strong Category 1 strength tropical cyclone. So again, a very bad forecast, and I do apologize for that. But a big fizzer is much better than a big Category 3 or 4 strength tropical cyclone. So we'll keep that in mind. And I bet that a lot of people are disappointed from this storm around Townsville and where it made landfall. Still though, the flooding threat remains for parts of central Queensland today. Let's take a look at it, keeping track of time on the bottom part of your screen and adding 2 hours because I'm working off Australian Western Standard Time, and I think the models have just decided to completely crash here. Oh no, they haven't. So we're taking a look at the Access G3 forecast model first. You can see as the storm moves through central Queensland, there's going to be some pretty significant rainfall rates of at least 25 to 30 millimeters every hour, and you're looking at 3 hourly totals approaching 100 millimeters. The Access model generally overestimates on rainfall by a good 30%, and when you go really long range, they can actually overestimate by up to, well, I mean, we saw with Queensland, they can overestimate by about 90%, and that's something I've really learned over the past couple of weeks, is that the Access is notoriously unreliable for rainfall in the long range. However, still, it's a high resolution model, so for at least the next day or so, it's trustworthy. And you can see a lot of rainfall developing around this tropical cyclone, and also further north into communities around the Gulf of Carpentaria, Mornington Island, and also around Croydon and Georgetown. Quite a lot of rainfall expected to fall there as we get into Saturday and then into Sunday. So it's going to be relatively wet across parts of Queensland today and into tomorrow. And this is where we'll switch it over to the ECMWF model to get a more accurate picture of what's expected, because the Access, again, notoriously unreliable, and they've proved that during Tropical Cyclone Kirrily. So I won't be using that model on this channel anymore, I can tell you that now. And hey, you learn something every single day. So Queensland expecting quite a lot of thunderstorms throughout Saturday and then into Sunday as well. It's going to be a pulse thunderstorm weather event. We're not looking at a widespread, severe, intense thunderstorm weather event, especially for Saturday. Sunday might be a bit of a different story, but associated with this tropical cyclone, the remnants of the tropical cyclone, and what looks to be a low pressure system that's going to set itself up around Lord Howe Island or Norfolk Island, you're going to get this big trough extending through here that's going to have a lot of humid and warm air in it. It's going to be very hot on the back side of this trough, where you'll be seeing daytime maxima approach sort of 45 degrees Celsius for some locations. And coupled with the humidity that this tropical low is going to bring into central Queensland, this is going to promote a lot of thunderstorm activity, and a lot of these thunderstorms could be relatively nasty. They could bring some damaging winds, some heavy rainfall, and also some large hailstones, but nothing new for central Queensland for this time of the year. It's going to be Sunday where we see some of the more severe thunderstorms, especially across southeastern Queensland around the scenic rim and up towards the Sunshine Coast as well. You can see areas of purples and blacks, and generally it's the purples and blacks that signify the severe thunderstorms on the forecast models, and they're kind of located around the Gympie sort of area on the Sunshine Coast, and that would be a thunderstorm or two to watch there. I'm expecting some severe thunderstorms to materialize there along this trough line, but apart from that, around central Queensland, it's probably going to be just the pulse thunderstorms, the isolated pulse thunderstorms that blow up, and pulse thunderstorms generally mean very hit and miss rainfall. So even though there could be 30 millimeters forecast for your location, and you live on a big farm even, your driveway might cop 100 millimeters of rainfall, but your house or homestead itself might only cop 5 or 10 millimeters. So the rainfall in these sort of events, as you know, is very hit and miss in a lot of locations. And that could cause some flooding in areas that haven't received any rainfall. So if you live close to a river, just be watching the river closely. If it jumps up by a couple of meters, then I would be continuing to watch it. And if it does actually threaten your home or your property, then either take necessary precautions that don't involve risk to yourself regarding floodwaters, because floodwaters are the most dangerous aspect of thunderstorms and also tropical cyclones. Well, the remnants of Kirrily kind of hover for about Sunday and then into Monday, and then the forecast becomes quite uncertain. It kind of just sits on Mount Isa, but before moving into the Northern Territory, but it looks like it's too well put together to be a strong tropical low at this point. It's going to move through the Northern Territory as a strong tropical low and then into Western Australia, and then it's going to move offshore from Western Australia by the looks of things. In fact, if we just really take this forward, it moves offshore and becomes a very weak tropical cyclone by around early next week, or actually next weekend, Saturday or Sunday. I don't put any money on this forecast. I mean, we've seen this track before from Tropical Low 03U, where I hyped it up again for it to move into Queensland, become a powerful cyclone, and then jog across the Northern Territory and Western Australia. It's a very erratic track for this tropical low to take, and I don't think it's going to happen as I roll this back. So until about Monday, that's when we're looking at the reliable forecast to end. Around Mount Isa, we could be seeing rainfall totals approach sort of the 400 millimeters at a worst case scenario, I would say. One or two locations might be picking up to 400 millimeters. But again, that 400 millimeter spot will be very isolated, and it's probably not going to be too much of a concern. However, the widespread totals of 100 millimeters plus are possible, triangulating an area between Croydon, Mount Isa, down towards Winton, and then across to Hughenden as well. That's where we could be looking at totals approaching the 100 to 200 millimeter threshold, and they will be widespread. But again, this is going to be constant rainfall over the course of maybe 3 or 4 days. So it's not going to be this torrential downpour. But again, because it is a tropical low, and there will be some strong thunderstorms around it the further we get into next week, then we might be seeing the risk of heavy torrential rainfall. But right now, I mean, looking at the radar imagery, it just looks like we're going to be seeing this constant moderate rainfall, which will still accumulate to totals of around 100 to 150 millimeters. So the cyclone threat is certainly not done for parts of Queensland. Well, the cyclone threat is done for parts of Queensland, but the rainfall threat is certainly not done at this time. And over the next 5 days, which will include the rainfall forecast for this coming weekend, after Australia Day. For parts of Queensland, we're probably looking at about 100 millimeters from this thunderstorm event. The further you get to the closer you get to the coastline, the more predictable the rainfall will become. So I'm more inclined to say Brisbane, the Gold Coast, and up towards the Sunshine Coast will be receiving totals between 50 and 100 millimeters. But as you get further inland, especially when you're getting to communities such as Longreach and Emerald and Rolleston, and even as far south as probably around St. George and the New South Wales Queensland border, then the rainfall becomes a lot more unpredictable, and that's where you're going to see the wildly varying amounts of rainfall, because it will be further away from that trough and the thunderstorms will be harder to predict. That basically does it for the coverage on ex-tropical cyclone Kirrily and also the rainfall event across southeastern Queensland. It's not looking like a severe or intense rainfall situation, but around Kirrily we could be seeing 1 or 2 spots approach the moderate flooding alerts. But yeah, Kirrily is certainly a huge bust in terms of maximum wind speeds. I mean, it was a storm in a teacup for Townsville, put it that way. And I think the 24 pack of ice cold beers was certainly necessary to drown everyone's sorrows about it not being an entertaining weather event. I am joking, of course. It's far better that this was a substantially weaker tropical cyclone than a much stronger tropical cyclone from what we were initially expecting as per the model guidance. But the models got it all wrong. Bureau got it all wrong. I think nearly everyone got it all wrong. And it was a big bust in terms of maximum intensity. Now, let's take a look at that cyclone that I I brought up at the start of the video, the very strong one that's going to be marching across the Southwest Indian Ocean basin. You can see its wind sway through here. It's well into the Southwest Indian Ocean basin right now, but it's called Tropical Cyclone Anghrek, and it hasn't threatened Australia whatsoever. It did give West Island and the Cocos Islands a bit of a scare, but it is a very strong tropical cyclone at this point. This is what it looks like. It's a beautiful system, also very small and very far away from Western Australia. It's probably about 2,000 to 3,000 kilometres away. In fact, probably about 3,000 to 4,000 kilometres away from Carnarvon, Exmouth and Karratha. But it looks really pretty, that's for sure. A Category 4 strength severe tropical cyclone and probably approaching Category 5 status at this point. And it's had a pretty good run as well over the past 12 hours, been able to develop a really nice eye. And it looks like all it's going to be doing from now on is strengthening. And it's a very interesting system as well. It's very similar to Cyclone Freddy from what we had about this time last year, where it marched from the sort of Indonesia sort of area, and it's going to march well into the Southwest Indian Ocean basin. But yeah, a very pretty system. You can see a very nice eye-like feature starting to develop, some very cold convection wrapping around the eye. It's struggling with probably sea surface temperatures right now. The sea surface temperatures probably aren't there for the tropical cyclone right now, but once again, looking very decent. It's very far out to sea and no threat to land. And these sort of systems are so much fun to track because you can learn a lot from them. You can learn a lot about how they track and how they move. Whilst they're no threat to land, and they're pretty predictable, these sort of long tracking systems, whereas a storm like Kirrily that kind of hovered around the coastline and made an absolute mess of itself, they're a very difficult system to track. And I mean, from this satellite presentation, it looks ragged, but you can see why the Bureau of Meteorology called a Category 3 strength system. It's got an eye as it was making landfall. It looked fairly solid as it was making landfall. But what we did miss was the fact that it was so poorly vertically stacked, which means the thunderstorms weren't aligning with the rainfall. And that means that it's in a very hostile environment and it's unable to get strong wind speeds consistently throughout the storm. So even though the northern side did pack a punch, it did completely miss land areas, and Townsville really only got a bunch of gusty thunderstorms between about 9 and I'd say about midnight last night. But yeah, the recovery effort, well, what recovery effort is needed to pick up the couple of leaves that might be on people's driveway will be well underway today as we celebrate Australia Day across the nation. But yeah, a big fizzer in terms of a tropical cyclone, that's for sure. We're waiting for the next one across the Australian region. But thank you so much for watching, and I'd like to give a special shout out to Alexa, Dave, Farid and Leisha for being the channel members for this month. Thank you so much for your support. If you too want to get your name mentioned in this part of the video, then click the join button down below. It's a small price to pay, and it also helps with purchasing software used in these videos. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next storm. Goodbye.